Alright guys, so today we're going to be focusing on Assassin's Creed Valhalla and why I'm worried about the game after the Ubisoft Forward press conference. So they showed a good solid chunk of about 30 minutes of gameplay, which is going to be running in the background for you guys. The audio's got to be turned down because they're talking in the background and all that, but that's not important. So after watching this, along with some other gameplay that other YouTubers who got beta access to the game, I realized that I wasn't the biggest fan of what we've seen so far. So it's not all negatives. You know, the Watch Dogs Legion and Far Cry 6 trailers didn't impress me a lot. But today we're going to be focusing on Assassin's Creed. And I think in order to understand why I'm worried for this game, you have to understand why every other Assassin's Creed game works or it doesn't work. So if we look at the first 8 Assassin's Creed games, that being the original Assassin's Creed in 2008, whenever that came out, through Syndicate, right? Not counting the spin-offs like Rogue or the PS Vita one or any of those, but just the primary games. They focus mainly on character, and they rely on the main character and the side characters in order to sell the world and the story. So this means, right, in games where these characters are strong, like Altair and Ezio and Connor and Desmond, depending on who you ask, that the games do really well, they perform well, the stories are believable. In other games, like Unity or Syndicate, where the characters aren't as likable or they're just flat out annoying, the games don't do as well, the story doesn't come across, and the game just isn't enjoyable as a whole. So these early games really focused on character and used that to show you the world. That kind of changed when we got introduced to Origins, and we switched from focusing on character and focused on the world and world building. So Assassin's Creed Origins really changed the franchise in a way many of us wouldn't have expected. Of course, I'm talking about the change to focus on RPG style and not the story kind of single straight path perspective that the first 8 games focused on. And, you know, this RPG style not only changed the gameplay and the combat, but the world building and the way the perspective the stories are told. And due to the typical nature of RPG games being longer, this would mean spending double or triple the time, depending on your completion rate, in these worlds that we, before didn't spend as much time in. So, like good RPG games do, they place heavy emphasis on world building in Origins and Odyssey as well. And so they allow the player to fully immerse themselves in the world and the location and the characters, but it's not all shown from the character's viewpoint. It's focused on building the world around the character and then placing the character in those locations and events, right? So while the worlds of early Assassin's Creed were fledged out to an extent, they didn't compare to Origins or Odyssey, right? And the 2 RPG style games that we have so far, they each serve their purpose. Origins is used kind of as a gateway into the RPG segment of Assassin's Creed, right? That's where they changed it, and it was just brand new, right? So that kept it interesting. Odyssey, that was the next one. They had a really interesting, probably one of the most famous time periods with the ancient Greece, right? And so you took that, and you took 2 unique games. And this is where we kind of get into the problem with Valhalla, right? So if you don't know this already, for some reason, you're watching this video, Valhalla focuses on Vikings and telling a story of a clan of Vikings migrating to a new land where they're not welcomed, and you gotta establish a settlement and protect your people from those who are not so welcoming. And the biggest problem I have with this is that I just don't care about Vikings, right? Don't have interest in Viking period. I don't know much about them. It's probably the least informed that I've been of any historical period going back in any of these games, and so that just doesn't draw as much interest. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are not interested in Vikings. I mean, if that's your thing, then go for it. But just to me, I don't think it's the most interesting set. And so if you've been looking at comments and forums and all of that, a lot of people are saying this just looks like a clone of Odyssey, which is not a bad thing. But if it's a clone of Odyssey, meaning the same gameplay mechanics are carried over, the same everything is just carried over, it's copy and paste, just reskin, right? that's the case, and if it's just in a more boring and less intriguing world, then obviously the game's going to flop, right? That just makes sense. And something that I thought about while making this video is that directly influences gameplay, right? So, every Assassin's Creed kind of has their play styles. They have their main weapon they want you to use, right? In Origins, they had a heavy emphasis on scythes and sickles and curved swords. And Odyssey, it was spears and tridents and all those types of weapons, right? And not saying that they don't have a different weapon for every playstyle, because that's just game design. You're going to have a weapon for everybody, but they have a primary focus. And this game, being centered on Vikings, is going to mainly focus, from what we've seen, on axes and that heavy tank-like gameplay. And I'm not a big fan of that. I like the swift, quick, light attacks, but evasive style, right? And I mean, there's people, just like the setting, who like that tanky style, and I could be wrong. This could totally not be the way they're going with it, but this is the way I see them going with a Viking setting, right? So those two things really is what has me worried about this game. There's other small problems, like the male voice actor. I'm not the greatest fan of some of the audio I've heard so far. I haven't really listened to much of the female character. And that's another problem with RPG games, with allowing you to customize your character or choose between a male and female character. That restricts what they can do with the character and, what story beats they can go down, because they want you to play your own character, whatever that means, right? So, I mean, I could be wrong. This could be my favorite game. I hope it's my favorite game. But just the setting and the implications it has on the gameplay really means that they're going to have to do a lot more work to pull me in and keep me interested throughout the game. And so that's just my opinion on what we've seen so far. I mean, we've only seen 30 minutes of gameplay, give or take. So you guys let me know what you think from what you've seen in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.